We are all Nigerians. Against all odds, we shall and must remain united. We may have our challenges, our problems, and setbacks. However, together we shall overcome them all. What doesn't break us shall make us stronger. This is the mindset that shall bring peace, progress, and prosperity to our beloved country. Do not let tribal and religious sentiments govern how you think, act, or feel. Don't be influenced by those who want to destroy our precious national unity. Everybody who's a Nigerian is your brother and your sister. This is the mindset of the new Nigeria. It is also the mindset that we must all adopt. Let us support each other in creating the Nigeria of our dreams. This message is from the Nigerian Television Authority, NTA.
All right, you're on to Good Morning Nigeria. Now to business. OPEC envisages sanctions on Russia could create oil supply shocks. Let's now join Kunle Adeye for details.
OPEC Secretary General Mohammed Sanusi Barikindo says the current and future sanctions on Russia could create one of the worst ever oil supply shocks, and it will be impossible to replace more than 7 million barrels per day of Russian oil and other liquid exports being lost given the current demand outlook. The OPEC chief made the remarks in a meeting with EU officials. The European Union is, however, of the view that it can provide more oil output from its spare capacity.
Ensure an unhindered, stable, and secure flow of energy to the whole world. OPEC and our non-OPEC partners will continue to remain vigilant in monitoring the daily movements of the oil market and will continue to meet each month to discuss the latest developments and act where necessary.
It is more important than ever to continue our dialogue because we have to solve all three crises at the same time, and we have to solve them together. The European Union is doing our part, welcoming millions of refugees from Ukraine and ensuring a functioning energy system in Ukraine.
And quickly to the details of Monday's tradings on the floor of the exchange. With business news, I'm Kunle Adeye.
Thank you very much, Kunle, for the business package and Good Morning Nigeria. Coming up next, newspaper review.
Our reviewer, Bayo Atayebi, is already here with us. Good morning, Bayo.
Thank you, Kiri, and good morning. Good morning, Kinsley. Good morning, Nigeria.
Right, Bayo, good to see you. Yes. Let's begin by taking a look at the window page of the Punch newspaper. And it's fairly busy with headlines and riders and photographs. Above the name flag, over 5,000 debtors owe 10 federal government agencies 4.67 trillion naira. That's according to the Minister of Finance. Train attack. Terrorists demand 16 detained commanders exchange for over 100 abductees. National grid collapsed twice to 10 megawatts, 33 megawatts last week. That's according to a report by the federal government. No resumption without meeting our demands, ASU tells federal government. And two earpieces, EU imports 40% of Nigeria's gas, demands more. Imported vehicles, customs slams 15% levy, clearing agents plan strike. And the late story is double-decker headline with a kicker and number of riders. 2023, Tinubu and Oshibajo groups clash. Aregbesola may back VP. Vice President lost his polling booth. We are not aware of his political relevance. That's according to Lagos APC. Presidential race not about big name but capability. Oshibajo, grassroots organization. I have no son grown enough to challenge me, says Tinubu. VP close to us, Aregbesola faction. And the photographs on the front page there captured by the headline, which is also like a caption, says Zaki followers protest at NHRC, that's the National Human Rights Commission, demand travel documents release. WAEC to cancel results of candidates involved in malpractices. Terrorists attack Kaduna community, abduct varsity student and one other. Insecurity threatening 2023 elections, Khan and Sultan lament. ICPC probes owners of abandoned estates in FCT. Osinachi police transfer case, minister and Khan youth demand justice. APC protests as PDP sweeps Adamawa Council elections. Killian.
All right, now it's time to turn to the Nation newspaper. Above the nameplate of the Nation newspaper, EU envoys seek gas supply from Nigeria. That's page 7. Mass burial for 80 Plateau residents killed by bandits. On page 2. Nigeria gets 3 million doses of Johnson & Johnson vaccine from Italy. On page 6. Ganduje appoints head of service 4 permanent secretaries. On page 27. 68 below the nameplate, 68 kidnapped twin victims in Niger terrorist camp. We trekked for 5 days inside forests. Doctors treated the injured. That's according to Ali Hassan, who was the only captive released after that operation. All right. The photo stories of the governors who had meeting with Tinubu on his ambition. Now, the lead story, Tinubu rallies governors in mission for APC ticket. National Working Committee gears up for primaries guidelines. Osinbajo unfolds plan. You get all that on page 4 of the Nation newspaper. Alleged 400 million naira fraud. That's at the bottom. EFCC to rearrange Olisametu on May 30th. That's on page 6. Let's bring in Bayo now.
Thank you, Gideon. Let's look at the story that Kingsley read from the top of the nameplate, which is saying that about 100 passengers of the Abuja Kaduna train are in custody. The detailed number has been given the managing director of the Bank of Agriculture, and he says that there are 68 persons being held by the criminal bandits who attacked the Abuja Kaduna train. And he gives the breakdown to comprise of 41 women, 22 men, and 5 children. The managing director, Alwan Hassan, who was released, gave this insight during a briefing to relatives of the kidnapped, the abductees, and the governor of Kaduna State. He says victims were made to trek for 5 days, resting intermittently at transit camps before they eventually arrived at the main camp, which he identified to be in Shiro local government area of Niger State. He said some abductees who suffered some gunshot wound were treated because they were treated by medics brought by the attackers. The only case of harassment, he says, that they suffered was that when the leader of the terrorists came, he said they should be each given 10 strokes of cane each for looking too comfortable. He later understood, the managing director was given detergent to go and take bath and wash his clothes. He was later to understand why, because they wanted him to look clean. They took him to another place, 3 hours away from the camp where he trekked, and that was where they did the filming of the video that has gone viral on the internet. He says that the managing director says that the abductees appear to be members of either Boko Haram or some other Islamic groups because they are very strict in the camp, banning smoking and other vices. Family members of the abductees are worried as the abductors have made no contact nor make any ransom demand. The Punch is reporting that the abductors had actually made demand of 16 of their detained commanders in exchange for the persons they have abducted from the train.
Well, Bayo, that's an interesting development. Now the attackers of the train, about 2 weeks ago now, are demanding a prisoner swap. A prisoner swap. And the details provided by the acting managing director of the Bank of Agriculture are also pretty useful. But he is out and safe. And the key thing is to ensure that the safety of the other abductees is not compromised in any way while the negotiations are ongoing. Those details are interesting, but I will refrain from, further conversations around that.
Yes.
As I said, so
it is safer so as not to jeopardize the life of those who are in confusion. But the only comment that is worthy of making is that they have a similar pattern of operations. There's a former colleague of mine at the NBC as a director who was abducted with his daughter. They took him from Katsina and they walked through the bush across to Bakori and went as far as coming closer to Zaria. Eventually, they first released the daughter and later on they released him. And while they were there, they had a nurse who was captive too. And if anybody fell ill, they would ask the nurse to make prescription and they would go into town, into Bakori town or the nearest town around Funtua to go and buy the drugs and bring for the nurse to treat them. So there's a pattern. And he says, also revealed that they have several camps along the route.
Again, I think what is striking here is that they appear to be very organized.
Yes.
They have medical personnel, who provide the medical services for someone that anybody that is ill or got injured, as the case may be. But what one wouldn't know is what would be the pattern of negotiation. That's what because I'm not sure that the federal government has taken any step, towards doing that.
There's also a report about deployment of security along the Kaduna-Abuja highway, and this time includes a helicopter that is carrying out what has been described as surveillance along the route. Members of the special force, who are comprising soldiers and policemen, are said to be at strategic locations along the route. For purposes of security, there will be no need identifying the locations where they are. But commercial drivers who drove through the highway say that they feel very confident now to drive through because of the presence of the security. And if so much so that at Sabon Gayan, one of the villages where there is always a weekly market, the weekly market was held and members of the NDLA were found along the route conducting stop and search, looking for drugs. You know also that drug is one of the commodities that the terrorists actually depend on for their criminality which they are using. Some female soldiers were also seen that were moving in the hillocks to support the reinforcement along the highway. But this story that Kirian read earlier on, it involves gunmen who attacked some 4 villages in Plateau. The affected villages are Kukawa, Gambahu, Dengur, Keram. All of them are in Kanam local government area. A resident of the area is claiming that an estimate of about 50 persons were killed. A spokesman for the Plateau Police Command, ASP Umar Gabriel, says that the police personnel have been deployed to restore law and order, and they are also conducting investigation, after which they will be able to give details of what had transpired. And at Port Harcourt, a fire incident at the Boni, Bile and Nembe jetty in Port Harcourt has claimed about 9 lives. And among those that died, unfortunately, is a pregnant woman and 2 other infants. About 60 boats were said to have been destroyed. And how did this come about? There were lamentations from the woman that people have been warned about conveying diesel or petrol on the boats. And apparently, it is said that it was the conveying of illegally refined crude oil into petrol that caused an explosion and ignited into a fire. A witness said that they have warned these people not to carry diesel or fuel inside the boat, but they won't listen, and the consequence is what happened. But the good thing was that it started around 2 a.m. and the fire services were there promptly and were able to put out the fire.
There's this story at Kingsley read about the, I don't know whether that's been discussed yesterday, Liso Sinachi, the singer, you know.
Osinachi Nwachukwu.
Yes.
You know,
Yeah, the crooner of Ekwueme.
Yes, and of course there are several publications on the social media as to what transpired, describing the husband as a bully and all manner of stories. But I think yesterday the Minister of Women Affairs visited the family.
Yes, he visited
you know, and asked for a kind of a meeting with the children of the lady, and of course after that meeting. She just said that, look, that the lady needs to get justice after all said and done. So that's about it. But again, when you talk about, domestic violence, this is one typical example of it. If all the publications are true, this is a typical example of what it means to say that, look, that should not be allowed to continue happening in our society. Domestic violence. Overseas, they're pretty much better handled, because if it happens, the man is always sent out from the house in the first place, right? And what have you. So I'm not sure that Nigeria has any form of policy or law that is guiding domestic violence in this country.
Well, you see, domestic violence is a very naughty problem. Most often than not, the victim is usually the female spouse. And most often than not, they try to endure accordingly for the sake of the children. But a man who violates you the first time violently and the second time is not likely to stop. The tendency is that, well, if for the security of the children you are considering, there is a need to consider the security of your life and get out of it. Mm-hmm. Like you said, in abroad, if such are reported, all they will do is the home that the wife is, they will evacuate the husband and ban him from visiting the place. And they will take a chunk of his salary as monthly maintenance for the wife and the children. And he cannot visit the wife or the children without permission of the authorities. So that's as strict as it is abroad. But here, most often than not, people tend to be very quiet about it.
Yeah. So the question is, how much domestic violence can or should a spouse endure?
There shouldn't be any.
Absolutely. That's the
there
key
shouldn't
point.
be any.
I said a spouse, whether male or female, because there are some women who also beat up their husbands, abuse the husbands emotionally, and so on and so forth. But this is a tragic incident that has occurred, and it's commendable that the Honorable Minister of Women Affairs has taken the steps that she has taken, gone to visit the family, and of course, called for justice for the late Osinachi. Now, the husband, we understand, of course, has been taken into custody by the police authorities. Usually, there's a dilemma here. The mother, the wife is late now, and then you have children who are young. She was only 42 years. So you prosecute the husband, and then you sentence him or otherwise, who looks after the children.
Yes.
And then because our social welfare system is weak. It's weak. And I would expect that in addition to what the Honorable Minister of Women Affairs has done, the FCDA Social Secretariat should also take this up and then see what can be done in respect of the family. But whatever it was, there should be no condonation of this kind of domestic violence that has led to this. But the critical question, gentlemen, once again, is how much domestic violence, or I don't know, let's say domestic abuse, can or should a spouse endure?
None whatsoever.
Absolutely. Baya Tebi, we appreciate you for being around.
Thank
See you again tomorrow. Okay, it's Good Morning Nigeria. We're live on NTA's network service. We're taking a short break now. When we return, we'll be dealing with Executive Order 11 that concerns the maintenance of public buildings and other infrastructure.
To every politician, as the campaigns gain momentum and passions begin to rise, remember, the errors of your opponents do not make you a success. Do not run down your opponent and inflame passions to violence between and among your supporters. What counts is what you plan to do for the electorate and how you intend to relieve their sufferings and bring succor. Nigeria is in dire need of patriotic leaders at all levels, leaders who will make national development their priority. Concentrate on telling the electorate what you intend to do when you get into office. Focus on making your vision clear to the electorate. Don't engage in verbal abuses, fake news or speeches. Keep dealing with issues that will bring progress. You win the hearts and minds of the people by being above board, by being civil, patriotic, and showing empathy. Let's join hands to make the 2023 elections peaceful. A message from the National Orientation Agency. A new edition of TV Guide is out, exclusively with Professor Umar Garba Dambata, Executive Vice Chairman of the Nigerian Communications Commission, NCC.
We have unveiled the 622 as a toll-free line through which consumers can be able to lodge their complaints. And we have introduced the 112 as a national emergency number.
This edition is a compendium of mind-blowing stories for your reading pleasure, ranging from technology, entertainment, economy, media, politics, family, and lots more. Pick up your copy and get abreast with issues and trending features within our space. TV Guide, very incisive, very educative and compelling. Grab a copy at the vendor near you or any NTA station nationwide. TV Guide, your indispensable companion.
The ever-busy ancient city of Onitsha is a commercial hub with millions of commuters seamlessly linking other states daily for business, leisure, and other purposes. To upscale its road network, the construction of a 1.6-kilometer-long second Niger bridge, including a 10.3-kilometer highway furnished with other infrastructure, has been in motion by the federal government. This project will ease congestion on the existing 56-year-old Onitsha bridge and boost the economic capacity of the state as it easily connects to other parts of the country. The completion of the world-class second Niger Bridge Onitsha will be one of the many proud moments of the state, its people, Nigerians, and foreign investors. Onitsha, which hosts the largest market in Africa, is geared up to boast of an impressive road network. Once again, these moments are made alive by the federal government, and it is deserving of all the applause.
As the 2023 elections draw near, remember, evil prospers when good men and women only wish for peace, but never take a step to make peaceful elections happen. Are you a father? Are you a mother? What are you saying to your children as elections approach? Have you warned them not to let themselves be used to cause violence? Have you explained to them what the consequences of electoral violence might be? Do your part to make peaceful elections happen. Talk to your children. Protect them from unscrupulous politicians who want to put them in harm's way, while their own children are comfortable at home, within, and outside the country. Let's join hands to make 2023 elections peaceful. This message is from the National Orientation Agency, NOAA.
All right, thank you for staying with us up to this moment on Good Morning Nigeria. Now, Nigerians have continued to applaud the signing of the Executive Order 11 by President Muhammadu Buhari to instill the maintenance culture in the country. Adam Sambo has this report to serve as a prompt for our conversation.
Initiated by the Federal Ministry of Works and Housing and approved by the Federal Executive Council since 2019, the policy document sees maintenance of public buildings and facility management as a conscious economic driver through which skills of the technical and vocational institution graduates can be put into gainful and rewarding engagement. Executive Order 11, which ties maintenance directly to the economy, is put in place to ensure the fullest implementation and impact of the policy.
Maintenance of assets is more than a culture. It is an economy from which many can prosper, and we must nurture and water that economy by policy and actions that create opportunities and inclusion for our people. It is my hope that this order will open the door to this treasure of opportunities for young technicians, for artisans, for vendors and suppliers, and for small businesses and cottage industries.
Already, the Office of the Head of Service of the Federation has approved the establishment of a Department of the Federal Public Assets Maintenance as a vital step towards supporting the implementation of the policy described as unprecedented in the nation's history.
While it is true that our economy has been diversified and the non-oil sector is leading in terms of contribution to the gross domestic product, the maintenance and facility management component of the services sector is an opportunity that is waiting to be maximized. By this order, I expect ministries, departments, and agencies to set up and ensure the operation of their maintenance departments and make necessary procurement for their maintenance in accordance with the provision of the Public Procurement Act.
Apart from enhancing job creation for skilled and unskilled labor, other expected benefits of the new policy includes the expansion of opportunities for micro, small, and medium enterprises who produce and supply all of the tools and materials required to support maintenance.
All right, thank you very much, Adamu Sambo, for that backgrounder. We have guests with us in the studios and also from one of our network centers. Let's welcome Collins Osayame, who is President, Association of Facilities Management Practitioners of Nigeria. Mr. Osayame, pleasure to have you with us on the program this morning.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Also here with us in the studios is Architect Enyi Ben Ebo. He's President, Nigerian Institute of Architects. Architect Enyi, delighted to have you this morning.
Thank you for having me. Good morning.
Okay.
We also like to introduce ESV Perpetua Ohama, Director, Resettlement and Compensation, FCDA. You're welcome.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here.
And joining us from our Lagos studio is Paul Erubami, Vice President, Association of Facilities Management Practitioners of Nigeria. It's good to have you with us this morning.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure to be here.
All right. Once again, it's our delight to have you all with us on the program. Let's just begin by taking a look at Executive Order 11 and why it became necessary. From the public sector perspective, my colleague introduced Perpetua Ohama, who is an estate surveyor and valuer and Director of Resettlement and Compensation in the FCDA. Why Executive Order 11?
Thank you very much for that question. You see, a lot of times things are known and people know they should do them. But if there are no rules and regulations, no laws guiding them, people just take them for granted and they are never done. This executive order is now making it mandatory for every ministry to put in place maintenance culture, which will help us to keep the values of our buildings at optimal levels at the least possible cost. It is very important because if you look at some of our public facilities before now, they were not at their best state. Some of them were in very sorry state. But with this order now, every ministry that is in charge of such public building should know what to do and will put in place the necessary steps to put the facilities in their best possible state.
Okay, I know that many Nigerians, will be wondering, why we actually need the Executive Order 11. For one to know that it is necessary, to maintain public facilities. Let's bring in Collins Osayame, President of Association of Facilities Management Practitioners of Nigeria. What do you make of the Executive Order 11?
Well, I want to thank the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, and particularly the Minister of the Ministry of Works, for deeming it necessary to bring the concept of facility management to the fore. This country has been known for building infrastructure and allowing it to rot. And people have adduced different reasons and summarized it as lack of maintenance culture. That phrase has permeated the fabric of our society. And I am happy to note that the president, while issuing this executive order, made it very clear that issue of maintenance has nothing to do with cultural issues, but it has to be a concerted and deliberate effort to make sure that you manage your facilities. And people have oftentimes assumed facility management or maintenance as just something you can do, but it is far from it. I have heard about lack of maintenance since I was in school more than 30 years ago, and the situation has not changed. But we are privileged today to bring facility management to the fore. And going forward, things are going to change because you need people that are trained and qualified to manage your facilities. You don't get a medical doctor to go to a court to go and defend an accused. That accused certainly will go to jail. So if we don't have the right professionals in place and the concept of facility management entrenched into our governance structure, there is no way we can change the narrative.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Mr. Osayame. Architect Ben Ebo, let's have your take on why Executive Order 11 is necessary. And let's just remind ourselves that things were not always like this. Decades ago, when you had the PWD, that's the Public Works Department, and later Ministry of Works, the maintenance culture was evident. So, but something then went wrong. So why Order 11 to get us back on track?
Well, thank you very much. And I'd also want to join my voice and that of my association in thanking the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria for this timely intervention in ensuring that our buildings, our public buildings especially, are properly maintained. Now, most public buildings are public assets which have a life cycle. And for a building to be properly, to live its proper life cycle, it must undergo maintenance. Now, once a building is designed, it has components, and each of those components has a lifespan. And it is necessary that at every stage, just like you have in the aviation industry, aircrafts go for type class, class C maintenance, class D maintenance. So it's to ensure that you don't wait for the tires of an aircraft to burst somewhere before you change it. They have a schedule that ensures that once it has done a certain number of months or years, it is changed. So it's the same thing with buildings. Over the time, we've been discussing particularly building collapses in our industry. And we forget that buildings also fail not because of collapses. Buildings fail because of lack of maintenance. A lot of our public buildings have been gutted by fire because along the line, a cable that's supposed to be changed at a particular time is not changed, and it results in a fire incident. We heard recently that even at one of our international airports, that the lights went off when a plane was arriving from abroad, and that's not a very good picture for our country. And the reason they gave was that that airport was over 30 years old and the cables needed to be changed. If we had a maintenance culture, we wouldn't wait until it embarrasses us before that is done. And so we commend the federal government for this initiative. But let me give some background to this Federal Executive Order 11. Now, as a professional body, we've been advocating that our buildings, because architects are passionate about the buildings they design. And when they see their buildings deteriorating in such a manner that they don't want to be associated with those buildings anymore, we made representations to the National Council on Housing, and that was accepted, and that was what led to Executive Order 11. And at the moment, there's a department in the Federal Ministry of Works and Housing, which has been, I think, the Federal Public Assets Maintenance Department in the Federal Ministry of Works that has been charged with that responsibility, even in the executive order. That department currently is headed by a director, and that department is charged with the responsibility of ensuring that our public buildings are maintained. So first and foremost, that as architects, we have a responsibility for preparing what we call a maintenance manual, because once you finish a building has about 3 stages. The pre-design, even in the building code, you have the pre-design stage, you have the design stage, you have the construction stage, so 4 stages, sorry. The construction and the post-construction. It is the post-construction we're talking about now. And for us to really have a proper post-construction, whatever it is, we expect that the architect should prepare the maintenance manual for the buildings, and those maintenance manuals normally, even in the design of the buildings, we take into consideration how those buildings will be maintained. If, for instance, you design a building and you don't provide for ducts that will be able to maintain if something goes wrong in the roof or anything inside the building, it becomes a problem when there are maintenance issues. So from the design stage, architects ensure that those provisions are made for proper and easy maintenance. Then at the end of the construction, when they are doing all the as-built drawings, because it's also very necessary that every building should have a copy of the designs or what was built within the building, so that when there's a problem like a fire, the fire service can go there and know how to tackle those issues without causing much of a problem. And also prepare a maintenance manual, which will now be a guide for the post-construction maintenance of the building. So we are quite happy with the development, and I'm sure that this would ensure that our public buildings become things that we'll be proud of. You don't invest so much money in a building and you end up, it doesn't, after 3 or 4 years, it becomes a challenge to walk through that building. A lot of our high-rise public buildings, for instance, the lifts don't work. If you want to go to any of the secretariats now, you have a situation where you have to climb 5, 6, 7 floors. And sometimes this can be very tiring because most of the time the lifts don't work. So that in a nutshell is our contribution to this topic. And we look forward to a situation where that department will be strengthened and enabled to carry out its functions properly. Of course, the downchain effect is that a lot of employment will be made available, just like the president has said, that it would open new vistas in employment for especially people in the technical line. They'll be able to have work, because it will now be mandatory, or it is now mandatory rather, for all MDAs to set up or to have this maintenance unit. And of course, they will have a budget for maintenance, and we hope that our public buildings will be a lot better for it. And this will permeate into the private sector as well, because once government takes the initiative, the private sector has no option than to take a cue.
All right, just a point, that in some cases the lifts, the secretariat, don't work. It's not just not working. Sometimes people get stuck in it,
Absolutely.
because of lack of maintenance and what
And
have
then
you.
you find a long queue of riders, waiting to board the lift that is creaky. Otherwise, I mean, you go there are 3 or 4 lifts, only one is working at any point in time.
Exactly.
And you're asking yourself, why is this so?
All right. Let's bring in Paul Rubami now, Vice President, Association of Facilities Management Practitioners of Nigeria. Let's get our own view on the Executive Order 11 that the President just signed into law.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here. I know that this is a good thing. It's been long coming, long expected. As far back as 2019, we expected that an order, legislative or executive, would have come into place to put into effect that particular maintenance policy that was formulated by the ministry and partners in the industry. My take really is now that we are at the point of implementing this maintenance policy, we should do a few things to get it right, so we don't create another avenue for public spending without value. And one of the first things we should do as a country, all the MDAs and ministries or agencies involved with implementing this order, should start by putting together a national database of public properties and assets. We have to have a register of all government properties, because there will be budgeting for the maintenance. There will be planning for how these properties will be maintained. We need to know how to generate value from this process. You cannot manage what you don't know, right? So that's the first thing. And then I also expect that there will be a condition assessment carried out. I've been to so many public properties. You cannot just start maintaining all public properties without knowing the condition in which they are. There's so much dilapidation that needs to be fixed, right? So there's the repair that needs to happen before you go into steady state maintenance to have sustainability of this program. But in all, there should be some form of strategic planning, right? So we don't wake up on an ad hoc basis and start ordering artisans around to fix things. It's important that we have some kind of strategic planning that includes, expected services from these buildings, expected service level, what kind of, return on investment do we expect for all of these projects that are going to be brought about, what are the sustainability targets, so many things that needs to be looked into in the strategic facility plan, especially looking at how these buildings and facilities are being utilized, because we have so many that are not being well utilized, so that optimization of these assets needs to also take place, so we don't throw money around trying to maintain. The capacity to implement this order would be a very big challenge, right? Because facility management has a whole body of knowledge that a lot of training needs to take place. Civil servants need to be trained. Artisans, vendors need to actually have proper training on how to put in the right processes to make this maintenance effective. I also believe that we should start thinking about the adoption of technology because so much of what we've been doing in Nigeria has been so manual and ad hoc, time-consuming costs that are not optimized as well. A lot of technology will bring down the costs, bring us better services in no time. And then let's think about user orientation. It's easy to start throwing money around, but if there's no ownership, if there's no individual ownership of the space you've been provided by the government in these public spaces to do your work, you would just be another source of ruin. Okay, so we need to have users oriented on how what our roles are with regards to maintenance, because sometimes we think of maintenance as something we do for the users, whereas there's a lot that the users themselves need to also be able to contribute to ensure that we don't have, destruction of this property. When you are assigned a space in the public building today to do any of the public service, you should expect some level of service. It needs to be defined. So we don't go about having contracts to provide maintenance and provide services without having a defined level of service. There should be an expectation. The president mentioned providing air conditioning. Somebody has mentioned about transportation systems in buildings, elevators, and so on. Having power, running water, sewage, and so on and so forth. There are standards, and these standards need to be defined so that when we go about implementing, we know exactly what we are working to. I also think that we don't need to reinvent the wheel when it comes to global best practices and standards. This has been done in public sectors all over the world. So Nigeria need not be an exception. We don't need to restart the whole process. We can actually adopt global best practices in our maintenance program, especially in the procurement process, because if you specify correctly what needs to be provided, then the vendors are guided. But if you have a contract that simply says come and maintain, then you will not get the kind of results you're expecting. And then I think we also need to look at it from the professional standpoint. Professional bodies in Nigeria need to come together and have some kind of mind searching to look at how we as individual practitioners have participated or have contributed to the problem we're trying to fix today. How much of our designs have had operational readiness and maintainability in their considerations? How much of our construction have actually had, this consideration for life cycle implementation? It's not just about government. So I think we should also think about how we can come together and rethink the process of designing and construction. So we don't say, oh, the government has not been providing this and providing that. Sometimes a quantity surveyor estimates the cost of a construction and throws in a budget to the government to just build, forgetting that as soon as you build, the life cycle that's just the beginning. In fact, the structure or the infrastructure is just about 10-15% of its life cycle value, right? So when we are creating that process of estimating and budgeting, we should not just overlook all the other expenses that are going to go into it, because over 50 to 100 years, that property is going to be, you need to invest more than 6 to 10 times what you put in to construct. So professionals need to rethink that whole process. And then again, like I've been mentioned before, all of those things about maintainability, issues of access, issues of degradation, issues of sustainability of these services. So it's multifaceted, right? So I'm happy that we have this executive order, but the bigger effort needs to come in a concerted way so that we can implement it properly and not just celebrate it, end up throwing money around and not get value from it.
Conversation. I would like us to probably, again, try to situate the implementation of the executive order in the context of what went on before. What Executive Order 11 seeks to achieve is a value reorientation towards maintenance of public infrastructure. Asset survey of value, Perpetua, just tell us from your experience or from what you know, why is it that public structures have been poorly maintained? I do recall that in years past, cleaners used to be employed as part of the service. They were either grade level 1, now there's no more grade level 1. And then once you face that, those category of workers, you now assist it to some corporate janitors who would then employ them. But that is not enough. And then you go around most public buildings in Nigeria and even the assets that we have outside of these shores, and you are amazed as to what is happening. What is it that went wrong? What was it that we didn't get right in terms of maintaining these structures?
Thank you very much. I would like to say that as an estate surveyor representing the association here, that we are one of the happiest groups about this Executive Order 11, because it's going to inject into the system a new way of thinking, a new way of doing things. Like you have observed, generally estate surveyors manage properties, whether big or small, and they manage a whole lot of people working in the properties. So they need to know what they need to do at any given time. Yes, as somebody who had worked in maintenance department for quite some time before I moved to my present department, I know the problems we had maintaining the properties, keeping them at optimum levels, making sure things work the way they need to work, including cleaners. People will look at cleaners and feel that they're not important in the scheme of things, but honestly, when you manage them, you will know how important they are in the scheme of things. For some reason, government decided that they didn't want to be employing those categories of staff, and then they outsourced them to facility management firms to handle. And most times, estate surveyors supervise them. And we know the problems we have, not paying their salaries on time. So many things have gone wrong. And that is why we are now happy with this executive order, because we believe, as the last speaker did say, that a lot of things will be put in their correct sequence, so that you know that when you employ people to manage a property, you also put in place how to pay them on time so that they deliver. So many things went wrong. And indeed, this executive order couldn't have come at a better time. Because if you look at some of our public facilities now, they're in very sorry state. But because of this, a lot of work has even started. Even our federal secretariat, there's a contract going on now, and they're trying to put it in place. But it has to be strategic. It has to be planned. It has to be well managed, so that in subsequent years, it will not go down again. When you are maintaining a property, what you keep in mind is optimum utility, optimum value. For an estate surveyor, what you keep in mind at any point in time is value for the owner, value for the occupants, value for those who even just come around and go out. You know, sometimes you enter an environment, you feel happy with yourself, you want to take photographs. Those things don't just happen. Somebody has planned for them, somebody is taking care of them, somebody is making sure that things are done at the right times, in the right way, at the right cost. Because in all, if you spend 10 naira to do a job of 1 naira, you really have not added much value. So in doing everything we do, in managing these facilities, in managing all the people that work in that building, you have to consider this. I do not know whether there will be another, whether there will be a call for professionals like the last speaker spoke, so that we all can sit down and say, okay, this order has come in place. Who does what? At what point do you come in? For instance, an estate surveyor will want, when an architect is designing a house, to tell him, please make allowance for all physically impaired people in that building. This is very important, because if it is not put in place by the architect in the first instance, there's nothing you are going to do when you are managing the property except to break and now put them later, which costs more, and more often is not the best. So there's a lot of work to be done. But in all, I believe that all the professionals involved in the environment should be able to come together and have a strategic plan on what is to be put in place, how we'll go forward. Again, for estate surveyors, they know that this will cascade down to the private owners. All the tall buildings you see in Abuja don't belong to the government. There are a lot of huge properties here with a lot of value that belong to individuals. Now they know that if government is making it compulsory for people, for government to maintain its properties, they too must put in place facilities, people, the necessary funds to maintain their properties at optimal level. Yes, we had been at a building when we were trying to rent one building for inspection, and the lift collapsed. And this is real.
You were inside the lift?
I was not, but my staff were inside with some people that were supposed to rent the place for. And the lifts collapsed and they went down. And you can imagine some of them were not even from our climb, and it wasn't funny at all. And in some countries, that will attract very serious sanctions. But here, when you report, nothing serious is done. So part of these things we expect that laws, rules, regulations will come on board. So that when you don't do the right thing at the right time, there should be sanction. That is part of what went wrong. Because there are no sanctions. You know, in those days, they used to have sanitary inspectors going around. If you don't keep your environment clean, they will sanction you. But it appeared that some of those things were watered down, so people were no longer regulated, nobody was in charge. Somebody needs to be in charge. There needs to be sanction for not doing the right thing. And once you don't have that in place, I bet you we will soon go back to where we are. So it is important that government puts into place a regulatory body for this new order, so that when you don't have what you're supposed to have in a public building, and it should be more than government buildings, when you don't have what you're supposed to have, like firefighting equipment, today we're talking of resilient buildings, buildings that can fight fire, that can fight any situation. There are some buildings that when there's fire and they notice it, water will automatically come down, chemicals will come down, and it will shut down the fire. What happened in UN building was because it was able to fight for itself. If not, that whole building would have come down and lives would have been uncounted when it happened. So we need to put a law in place to guide this so that there will be sanctions for those who do not do.
Which law do you require? The executive order is a facilitative order signed by the president to ensure the implementation of a policy. But the point you are making is...
The ministry will domesticate it.
No, the point you are making is noted. Let's not get into the legislative aspect. Kieran, the point you are making is that there ought to be, okay, you have the executive order now. What will be the sanctions regime for failure to implement it?
Okay, now, and that would take us to the aspect of implementation, because, of course, we've known, historically speaking, that the issue we have always had in this country is that of implementation. When beautiful policies are made, and then when it comes to implementation, it becomes difficult, and that has led to failures, in some quarters. So let me bring you again, Collins Alzheimer, as a professional. What should be the next step? Now, the order has been given. What should be the next step with respect to implementation? What should the MDAs, the ministries, should begin to do at this point to ensure implementation?
All right. Thank you very much. I want to start by saying that the implementation phase is what the executive order has come to establish. And thankfully, the department that will be in charge of establishing the framework for the maintenance of public assets has already been established in the Ministry of Works. And the next step will be to equip that department with the right knowledge, with the right processes, establish standards for implementation of this policy across the MDAs. The department should be equipped with the right professionals that understands facility management. And what does that entail? Adequately trained professionals that understand how to create strategic decisions that will help implement the management of facilities. Because facility management actually is delivered at 3 levels: at the strategic level, tactical level, and operational level. All what we have been seeing is operational activities, where you have the technicians dealing with stuff, just fixing things. And unfortunately, the value you get is very minimal. And that's why we are seeing all of what we have established here today. Now, with the department in place, we have a director who will be able to sit down and strategize, carry out a proper planning process on how to cascade this down to the various MDAs.
Excuse me, I'm not cutting the short, right? If all the departments, all the MDAs, administrators will begin to create either a directorate or a new office, with respect to this, begin to do a fresh employment of people who are trained, is that what you mean? Or do we have to engage the private persons like you who are into maintenance to take care of that aspect?
Yeah, when you read the executive order carefully, you notice that a department has already been created.
In all the MDAs?
No, in the Ministry of Works and Housing, that will be responsible for the implementation of these policies. Now, we expect that the department should be saddled with the responsibility of cascading this down to the various MDAs. What the policy has created is a framework, because we don't have a framework. It's only a wishful thinking if you think things will just start changing without sitting down and somebody being in charge to make sure that the right processes, the right standards are in place.
The Ministry of Works is just one ministry. We have several ministries.
Good.
Several MDAs.
Absolutely.
So now it's been established in the Ministry of Works. How would it be cascaded down to other without fresh employment in those other MDAs to ensure that the policy is implemented? That's my worry.
Creating a framework has to do with showing people this is how it should be done. This is what you should do. If you don't do this, this is what's going to happen. A framework is created after you've gone through the entire length and breadth of the country, carry out an audit of the existing buildings Nigeria has, and you've identified the state of this asset. You know the resources available to manage them. Then you come up with a framework. And just like when buildings are being developed, the ministry is in charge of construction and other things. But the various MDAs have their building departments, and the ministry sends people to oversee. So it's like the overall agency responsible for ensuring that the facility is maintained. The problem we've had all along is we have not identified who is actually responsible. I'll give you the building team. We have the architects, we have the engineers, we have the quantity surveyors, even the estate surveyors and the planners. But who stays with all of these professionals I have mentioned, perform one function or the other in the building and move to the next site? Nobody stays with the facility. And the truth is that these people have done their part. Now, the executive order has identified that gap and created a body that will be responsible for ensuring that this particular function that nobody is performing at the moment. That is why, if you want to ask what is the real problem in the entire strata, there has not been anybody in charge, anybody responsible. Everything is being done in a ad hoc manner. So when the framework is developed, they now present it to the various MDAs to begin to implement in their various units or departments or ministry. And if they fail to do that, then they can now enforce whatever penalties if the building falls short. So I believe that the first thing is to empower the department that the policy or the executive order has identified. Every professional that is involved with the built environment have to contribute one way or the other to ensure that the department is given the right tools and resources to create this framework, be it going to carry out an audit, condition assessment, putting processes in place, developing standards. All of these has to be properly planned if we don't want to go back to where we are coming from.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Mr. Collins Usayame. I mean, I was quite curious about the 3 stages of facility management that you talked about: strategic, tactical, and operational. That is almost like a military approach to warfare: strategic, tactical, and operational. But I would want your colleague, Paul Erubami, to also weigh in on this point with regard to implementation. What is your understanding of what the executive order seeks to achieve in terms of the framework for implementation? Because if it is that you will have a department in the Ministry of Works, well, you have some 600 or so plus MDAs right now, and most of them have their own structures. Others are in borrowed or rented structures. These will have to be maintained. The usual practice now is for the admin department, the director of admin, to be in charge of maintenance, and you find all kinds of artisans running in and out of the office and things not properly handled. Are we envisaging a maintenance department to be created in each of the MDAs to look at it? Because maintenance is a big issue.
Thank you very much. So let me just make one point clear. We have always had people in charge of maintenance in every MDA. I mean, if you study our national budget in detail, you will find that a large chunk of these funds, operational funds of the government, is already going into maintenance. Thank you for mentioning the admin department, a directorate and an officer in charge of administration. They already perform functions of facility management. They already spend the money for maintenance. Habit, not enough money has been allocated, for example. Also, they are not properly trained, don't have the proper skills. And as such, there's a lot of misapplication of the funds, so you're not getting value for the maintenance funds being expended. This bill advocates for fresh employment in the public sector. Did not advocate for a new department to be created. It creates a new enablement for the people who are already saddled with the responsibilities of maintenance in all of these public buildings to, one, be trained with a proper facility management body of knowledge. For a policy implementation that includes the framework developed by the department in charge of public maintenance, public building maintenance for the Ministry of Works, which serves as both a regulatory and supervisory or audit function over all of the MDAs. It does not empower that department in the Ministry of Works and Housing to begin to execute maintenance in all the MDAs. No, there are people there already. There are inadequate budgetary provisions. There are poor skills of the people who are there. So developing a system for audits, for training, for proper processes and framework to guide the people in the MDAs, right? And then it also creates a new enablement for public procurement to engage facility management companies, maintenance companies, artisans. So it envisages that there will be a new process of procurement that will require the engagement of vendors. The president mentioned it in his speech when signing this order, that there will be engagement of vendors. because you can't employ everybody in-house in government to maintain all public buildings, including cleaners. So I don't blame the government for not wanting to have cleaners. Nobody wants to have everybody employed as your staff. That's not your core business, right? There are companies that it is core to them. Now, how do you procure services? There have to be a proper specification. There have to be service levels defined, okay? And then there have to be a benchmark costs so that you don't end up throwing money around. I keep saying this because we end up using a new policy or a new order to create ad hoc solutions everywhere and then end up not having value, okay? So we as professionals, we provide the training. Everyone who currently manages these buildings need to be trained. So there has to be a rollout of a training program that we can contribute to the entire body of knowledge, train them, give them the right tools and templates so that they know what to do, okay? And then help develop the processes with which the public buildings maintenance department will implement the supervision of all of the other MDAs. So that's why I talk about professional bodies not going to just sit down and say, oh, the government is about acting. No, we need to not wait to be invited. We need to actually, at this point, begin to think about how we can come together and say, how do we support that new department that's going to be the supervisory department? What processes do they need? What training do they need? All right, we need to start working on that right now before it gets too far in. And then for all the other MDAs, who are the people there that need training? What processes do they need? How do they implement this executive order? What goes into the next budgeting cycle? Because the president says you need to create a budget and make sure it's embedded in the budgeting system, right? But this has to be done systematically. You can't just wake up and say we need X amount of money. It has to come through proper asset identification, specification of service levels, condition assessments done. And these are all professional projects that need to be implemented so that we can have a short-term, medium-term, long-term budget developed, and then the implementation can roll out from there. So in a nutshell, training, development of processes, tools and templates, introduction of technology will help to empower these people because there's no need for new employment or recruitment. They just need to be empowered with the right skills and tools.
Yeah, gentlemen and lady, let's begin to be specific here. When a structure is dilapidated, it could be that there's a failed portion, that there are cracks in the structure. It could be electrical. It could be that the roof of the structure is giving way, due to old age and what have you. That means that we need specific professionals to handle the maintenance. And when you say that the maintenance department exists in an MDA, does that department have professionals in these specific areas who must have the knowledge to be able to maintain those aspects? For instance, we talk about a leak, giving way or collapsing. You can't bring a mason, for instance, to go and take care of that. You have to bring somebody who is knowledgeable in the maintenance of that facility. So that's why I'm so worried about the specificity and the implementation aspect of this order in the first place. And that was why I asked this question. Should it mean that MDAs and ministries should begin to engage vendors, professionals like you, to come into this? Because of course I know that you must have persons in your employ who are knowledgeable in some of these areas of perhaps failures that could lead to the dilapidation of a particular structure. So let's bring in again the architect here with us, Ben Abel. Could this be the reason why the president linked this order to national economy?
Well, thank you. Let me just add here that procurement of buildings is a multidisciplinary process. You have various professionals who are involved at one stage or the other in bringing these buildings to be. and each of them has a role in the process. Take, for instance, you talked about lifts, you talked about cables, you talked about cracks, you talked about several other things which you didn't even mention. Now, the approach is really to ensure that each of the professionals as a specialist in those particular fields must be the one to advise on what to do. The department that is in the Federal Ministry of Works would be like give an oversight function more or less to most of these other MDAs, and they would warehouse specialists in some of these fields, because if your facility has a lift, for instance, or an escalator, or any of those specialist engineering stuff, you don't need to employ a mechanical engineer, for instance, if you don't have a lift in your facility. But the headquarters, the Federal Ministry of Works and Housing, may have all these professionals. So if any MDA has need for specific specialists in certain areas that are not very common to most MDAs, you could leverage on the expertise at the headquarters to ensure that you get those skills. But having said that, at the beginning of my discussion, I talked of a maintenance manual. Now, that document would specify for each of the elements within the building what the cycle of maintenance should be. Buildings are like human beings. At most of the time, you have to eat to keep going as a human being. At periodic intervals, you have to do your medical checkups to ensure that nothing that you don't, even if you're not sick, but there may be something that's going wrong in your body that you've not known yet. So that is the reason why we need all of these professionals who were involved in the building process to be warehoused at the ministry to provide this expertise for the various MDAs that would have maintenance units. Then again, somebody talked about training. Yes, there's a need for training of the various professionals in the art of maintenance. I would say the value chain in most of our professions cuts across a lot of other disciplines. And for any professional to play very well in certain areas, you need to get some additional training in addition to whatever your profession is, to be able to carry out that function properly. So there's a need for us as professional associations within the built environment to come together and speak to ourselves and see how we can assist government to ensure that this executive order is seamlessly executed, and that at the end of the day, the reasons for which the executive order was signed would be achieved. Then again, there's the issue of budgetary allocation. I know a lot of people are really very weary about this issue of budget in our maintenance of public facilities. Sometimes people, if you go through the line items within the budget, you discover that there have been instances, for instance, where computers are maintained almost every year, and you wonder what went wrong with the other ones. So we also need to audit some of these processes to ensure that it does not become an avenue for public wastage of funds, and that it achieves the purpose for which it was established. Yes, most of the MDAs have maintenance units, even if it's a very small unit. So it's not that these units have not been there, but the issue is what has been the budget. And if the budget for a unit is very small, of course, not much can be done about it. Then again, what has been the bane of most public buildings is that we wait until a facility gets so dilapidated before we intervene. Take, for instance, if there's a leaking pipe within a building and you don't sort it out immediately, that leaking pipe could result in several other damages. It could get into the electrical conduit pipes and cause bridging of the cables. It could also mess up the tiles on the walls and weaken them, and they start falling out, falling down. And it could have several implications. And so, for maintenance, they say a stitch in time saves 9. The earlier it is identified and nipped in the bud, the better it is for the building or whatever facility it is. So we must begin to maintain or imbibe that maintenance culture within our public assets. Now, it also has to be strategic, like somebody mentioned earlier, that you don't just jump into maintenance without knowing having a background of information of what the problem really is. I'll give you an example. In a building, you could see a leakage at point A, or you could see a problem at point A, but the real cause of that problem is at point B. And so if you don't have a good knowledge of how the system works within that building, you'll be intervening at point B, not knowing that the problem is actually at point A. And so what happens? Somebody just starts breaking a wall somewhere. He breaks it and patches it because he has not seen any faults there, and the problem is still there. But when you have people who are skilled in how those things are put together, they'll be able to tell you that, look, there's a joint somewhere here. That problem may actually be coming from that joint. And so if you tackle it at that joint, you will be able to fix the problem. So there's a lot of expertise that go into this. And I think all MDAs don't have to employ all the expertise in each of the MDAs, but those experts and those skilled manpower could be domiciled at the Federal Ministry of Works and Housing, and they can now cascade to other MDAs. And of course, this order does not only apply to the federal government, it cascades to the order is that the states and even the local governments should domesticate this order and ensure that it happens all across the various strata of government.
Yeah, that's fine. It's interesting. We do hope that the subnational entities will take a cue from what has been outlined in Executive Order 11. Architect Benebo, we're taking a short break now. You mentioned something about maintenance manual. Who is the custodian of that maintenance manual? Very quickly.
Okay, that maintenance manual, like I told you, is part of the documents that are prepared at the end of a project. Now, of course, for every building project, the architect is normally the coordinator or the head of that process. So he does the as-built drawings. That's as different from the initial design drawings. He also prepares a maintenance manual with the contributions of all the other design professionals that worked on that project. So at the end of the day, that maintenance manual is packaged and handed over to the client for implementation post-construction. Of course, at the post-construction level, the client is at liberty to appoint his own. He can engage the architect and other consultants if he still wants, but he's at liberty.
That is the key. That is the key, Kirian. Is it who is the custodian? In the client's team. I mean, you have a broad range of experts and units. And who is the custodian? Kirian, I think we'll take that question. Maybe get the other guests to also respond to this when we come back from this short break.
157-kilometer Lagos-Ibadan Railway is the first double-track standard gauge railway to be built in West Africa. The Mobolaji Johnson train station is a masterpiece, an infrastructure that is gradually becoming an iconic building in Lagos State. The modern facilities put the station on a world map of train stations. Likewise, other new train stations across the country built to world-class standards. The train and its convenience is indeed an admirable effort, with commendations from Nigerians.
This is a station that we have to commend the federal government for putting a beautiful face, empowering us in Lagos State, not only in economic and political arena.
I can say that I'm really impressed with the infrastructures in place. Kudos to the Minister of Transportations. Kudos to the federal government.
Truly, good things are coming out of Nigeria, and the federal government is deserving of all the applause.
The OCI Foundation International, with the support of the Nigerian Cancer Society, the Office of the Nigerian First Lady, the Future Assured Foundation, the First Ladies Against Cancer, the Sweet Home Humanitarian African Foundation, and other esteemed partners, present the Savvy Breast mobile application, a game changer in the fight against breast and cervical cancer, the first of its kind anywhere in the world. Life-saving, unique, innovative, educative, interactive, engaging, and informative. Designed by a Nigerian for Nigerians, for everyone. Male, female, old, young, rich, poor. It sends customizable reminders for cervical cancer screening and breast self-examination. Top Nollywood star. It locates breast and cervical cancer service providers and discounts from any village, town, city, or state in Nigeria. It is free. Download it now on all iOS and Android devices. Just type in Savvy Breast. It is free. Share it now using the share button on the app menu to friends, family, and work colleagues across all social media networks, including WhatsApp, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, emails, etc. It is free. A token from the OCI Foundation International to all Nigerians. We rise by lifting others.
Finally, the hero of Nigeria's democracy has arrived. He shall usher us into a new phase of development, peace, and prosperity. He is the father of the new Nigeria, His Excellency President Muhammadu Buhari, GCFR. Welcome to another season of giving Nigerians hope yet again. We are sure of a great future for both ourselves and generations yet unborn. We look forward to your leading us as a nation into our manifest destiny. Though the challenges against us as a people are many, we know that your leadership shall set us on the right path to our greatness. A new dawn beckons on us all, and having you as our president is a precursor to this. Thank you for believing in Nigeria. This message is from the Nigerian Television Authority, NTA.
The counsel of our fathers.
I believe we have fought one civil war too many in this country. So those who experience it run away from it.
Nigerian youth, let's build our nation together.
All right, you're still watching Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the NTA. Well, before we went on break, one of our guests was talking about who's going to be the custodian of the implementation document. And I would like to bring in Madam Perpetua here to let us know what should be done. Who is the right personnel, to manage such an implementation document?
Thank you very much. Like the last speaker said, at every stage of a building, there are professionals who are in charge. At the end of the construction, a property manager is appointed. Most times, an estate surveyor and valuer. The estate surveyor and valuer gets these documents that are being talked about now, the manuals, and then the estate surveyor is saddled with the job of, I'm not talking of only government, I'm just talking of what happens in a standard property. And then this estate surveyor is saddled with the job of getting the right professionals to help in the management and maintenance of that property. Most times you may require the services of vendors, vendors, janitors, people in charge of electricals, people in charge of different things, and then you have scheduled maintenance. You also have corrective maintenance. You have preventive ones. At every stage, you should know when one comes and when the other will follow. The scheduled maintenance are the ones that you are supposed to do periodically to keep the property in the state of its highest value. The corrective ones are the ones you do when there's a problem in the property and you have to fix it. There are also predictive ones. Those ones when you suspect that something is about to go wrong or something, you can use your sense or equipment or whatever to trace and see whether something is really about to go wrong. Maybe you have taps that are running and suddenly you notice that the pressure is a bit slower. You don't want to wait till it stops. Then you begin to look for it. You find out, can use the equipment to find out why is the pressure of the water not going up again. I mean, I'm just giving a typical example and then you can fix it. So when the architects finish building, they hand over to property managers. And in most situations, they are estate surveyors. What happens in government is that sometimes when you're outside government, you do not understand how government runs. And you can put a lot of blames on the table. But if you are there, you will know that it is not a one-man show. There are a lot of aspects that make it look the way it looks. Sometimes procurement for facility management, for facility management issues may take so long that the existing contract will expire. Because most of our facility management contracts run for 1 year. Sometimes we are not thinking FCT of allowing them to run for 2 years, like street light maintenance. So when you have a street light maintenance for 1 year and you start procurement in the middle of that year, it may not come to friction until the middle of next year. So what happens in between? That period is when you begin to see a lot of problems coming up, meanwhile no service vendor to take care of it. So there will be need going forward to see how some of the other aspects of work in government are made to take care of.
In particular, procurement. That's what
Yes,
you're saying. That's
yes,
the point.
it's a very
I'm sorry
big
to jump in so that we're getting pressed for time. The other guests, I want them to also weigh in on this. But Kirian, before I pop the question to Collins Osame, what we do see and find in public offices in MD is when you go to the offices of the big men and the big women, the offices are usually plush. You see it is tiled, it's neat, the toilet is well taken care of, the approaches everywhere. But outside of that, then you begin to see the rot that is left there. But Mr. Osayame, you are president of the Association of Facilities Management Practitioners of Nigeria. And we do know that from time to time, there are clashes with the professionals. What is the relationship between your association and estate surveyors and valuers? So that when we're now talking about Order 11 and how to implement it, he said, no, we are the facility management practitioners. The other estate valuer said, no, we are the recognized ones. So you want to start the clash here, you want to clarify.
Because she has already said that after construction,
it is handed
over
yes.
To the property manager.
To the property manager. And he's talking about the property managers are estate surveyors. What is your relationship?
Well, I would like to start by saying that we're here because the current structure is not working. Everybody has agreed that the current existing structure to take care of maintenance of our public infrastructure is not working. And the current existing professionals in the built environment have always been on ground, and the situation remains. So I believe that because of a gap that a professional body or a professional association or institution has not filled, that could be responsible, and the need for this executive order. And over the years, the role of a facility manager has been played by different professionals. But sad to say that these professionals do not have the necessary wherewithal or competence. Facility management has 11 body of knowledge, has identified 11 body of knowledge. And if you look through the existing professionals, they may have a few of those competencies. But a facility management professional that has been trained, gone through the process, truly has what it takes to take care of what we are talking about. Incidentally, I started my career as an estate surveyor, a good one at that. So I know exactly the role of a facility manager. I know the role and function of an estate surveyor
Briefly
within the
summarize.
built environment. The estate surveyor is trained to procure interest in land, to help the investor recover his investment, whether through making sure the property is sold after it's constructed. Whatever investment the owner, the developer has invested, he ensures that he protects the investment. The facility manager is trained to ensure the continuous use and functionality of that facility. The user of the facility is his responsibility, making sure that the purpose for which that facility is developed is realized. Every facility or every structure is built to perform a function.
Okay, let's stop you there. Kingsley, there's one aspect of this conversation that we didn't bring in earlier on, and that has to do with the fact that if you look at most of the facilities that we have in this country, especially big structures, bridges and roads and what have you, all these are part of infrastructure. They're built by foreign firms, foreign companies. You know, and when it comes to maintenance, I don't know. Do you think that it's a factor? It's a factor. You know, if you're not part of the building, I mean, how would you also be part of maintenance? Does it make sense? Let's bring in your professional colleague in Lagos. You know, to come in here. What do you make of this, right? Because most of the facilities we're talking about are all built by foreign firms and foreign companies.
All right, thank you very much. It's really not the issue of who builds. We have the capacity for local firms, engineering firms, and construction companies to build. The topic on the ground, the real issue we are dealing with here is who maintains after the building. So let me take you through a quick run through of the building cycle. It starts with the planning stage. This is where the investor, owner, government, you know, whatever, who is going to put the money down to create a new property, decides to plan, creates a brief, gets in designers and planners, creates a strategy for what this property is going to deliver when done. At this stage, the facility manager's role is basically advisory in terms of looking at the end goal, the operational readiness. Goes through design where a series of consultants, engineers, all classes or categories of engineering is involved in the built environment. They come in to work with architects and designers and project managers, quantity surveyors, to come together and create a bill of quantities, a construction plan, a program for works, and then execute the construction, which is the next phase. The FM's role in all of this is also advisory for maintainability considerations, for sustainability considerations. Out of that construction, the engineers and architects and designers and project managers are supposed to deliver a series of documentation for operations and maintenance, which includes the as-built drawings, the operations manuals, the warranty documentation, the licenses and permits, training manuals for people who are going to run the place, and so on and so forth. These are delivered to the owner, represented by the real estate person who started the project in the first place. So the estate surveyors and valuers are part of the planning. They are the ones advising on the investment. They are the ones receiving it to say it's now done. And then they're supposed to automatically and immediately engage facility managers as the next phase. In fact, the engagement of facility managers are supposed to have started right from the planning stage for advisory purposes through the development. And then the designers and the engineers have developed an operations and maintenance manual. They've developed as-built drawings and all the other documentation. And then the property manager receives these and hands them over to the facility management professional to manage. What has happened in Nigeria is that we do not have a stock of professional facility management training from the academic system. And this was mentioned in the executive order. We need to have a process for developing curriculum to create diplomas and degrees in facility management, because the body of knowledge exists, okay? And then these professionals are now supposed to manage the entire operations, the tactical implementation of, and then the strategic deployment of policies and procedures and planning to ensure that the value envisaged by the real estate professionals and the owners and designed and constructed by the engineers and the quantity surveyors and the designers are realized. So in essence, all the other professionals in the built environment, they do all their work so that the facility manager can deliver results. And that result is in how the buildings are used, how the asset value is preserved, how the environmental impact is reduced, how life cycle costs are optimized and reduced, and so on and so forth. So,
Paul, Erubami would like to appreciate you. We're getting pressed for time now. We have to call it a day on this conversation segment. Paul Erubami, Vice President, Association of Facilities Management Practitioners of Nigeria, joining us from our Lagos Network Center. Big thanks for being part of our conversation. Collins Osayame, who is President of the Association of Facility Managers, also with us here in the Abuja studios, would like to appreciate you for being around. Estes Toveo of Velua, Perpetual Ohama, who is Director of Resettlement and Compensation in the Federal Capital Development Authority here in Abuja. We'd like to thank you for being part of our discussion.
Thank you for having me.
Architect Enye Ben Ebo, President, Nigerian Institute of Architects. We thank you for being our guest this morning and for your contribution.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so let's go over to our sports desk.
Carlos Queiroz has left his role as Egypt coach after the Egyptian Football Association EFA terminated his contract by mutual consent. The decision comes after the Pharaohs failed to qualify for the 2022 World Cup. Egypt missed out on a spot at the tournament in Qatar after being beaten 3-1 in penalties by Senegal last month. They also lost the 2021 Africa Cup of Nations final to the same opposition on penalties. Former Real Madrid, Portugal and Iran boss Queiroz had taken charge of the Pharaohs last September, replacing Hossam El Badri. But the EFA board is now expected to meet on Tuesday to discuss whether to replace the Portuguese with an Egyptian manager, with former striker Hossam Hassan and Pyramids coach Ihab Gala in the frame. Meanwhile, Atletico Madrid must close part of their stadium for Wednesday's Champions League quarter-final second leg against Manchester City, UEFA has ruled. The Spanish champions must close off at least 5,000 seats at the 68,456 capacity Wanda Metropolitano. UEFA's punishment is for the discriminatory behaviour of Atletico fans during last week's first leg match in Manchester, where City won 1-0. Atletico will also have to display UEFA banner reading "No to Racism."
And that's Good Morning Nigeria for today.